When I think about it from beginning to end, from super poor, high school dropout, college, University of Chicago, president of a company, as I think through that level of success, and I think about my siblings, chief legal person in a company, CEOs, I'm a president, CFOs, chief people officers, my siblings, super successful. I am convinced that there is more that is great about America than is broken about America.
Welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Today I have Nathan Yearsley with me. Nathan is a man after my own heart and my own name. He is the president of Augason Farms, which is really involved in helping people get prepared for emergencies and disasters through their manufacture of really high quality food products. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think it's going to be interesting and relevant to a lot of people listening because Nathan has been able to take this company from, just selling emergency preparedness meals for that express purpose to people are now using this product as just a staple in their homes. It tastes that good. It's that high quality of a product. Nathan also has a lot of experience in, turning around struggling companies, and he's got a lot of advice to share just in the whole manufacturing process, dealing with tariffs, all those sorts of things. So welcome to Manufacturing Insiders.
It's great to be here, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how about if we start off with the story that you told me about when you first came to Augason Farms and you're like, I recognize this brand.
So actually I'd been with the company about a year and a half, something like that. And I'd recognized the brand. It kind of, how things from your childhood tickle your brain for a little bit before you realize that it's actually meaningful. But I was sitting in my office, just in the sofa across the room from me with the founder's son. And he and I are both high school dropouts. When times got tough in the Yearsley household, I ended up having to drop out of high school to help my family. I worked at a dairy and gave my paycheck to my mom, and we fed my 5 younger siblings. And my dad was in the hospital because, most people run into trouble, not because of the zombie apocalypse, but because of illness, injury, and job loss. That's when tough times come. And they came to my house like it comes to everybody's house. And so I'm a high school dropout, back to high school, college, thanks to good friends who got me back into high school and kind of rewrite it because I was really enjoying not having to go to school at 16 years old. Long story short, 30-year career, president or CFO, then president of Augason Farms. And I'm sitting here with Mark, the founder's son. And he and I are having just a simple conversation about, he and I were both high school dropouts, both went back to school. And I told him the story about when times were really tough, that the charity food that would come into our home. And I was describing that moment, and we realized that it was charity food provided by an agency, but had been produced by Augason Farms.
Wow.
And it was such a full circle moment because, that's what kept us alive. We were in trouble, and that food came to our house. And one of them is this chocolate mousse right there. It is super good. And we made it like smoothies and like hot chocolate in the wintertime because we always ran into our worst time was like February. There's nothing that you can harvest out of the garden. The hunting seasons are over. It was just tough. And that was such a comforting, I just felt like a real person because we had real food. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, that's what that was. It's pretty crazy to sit here now representing this company that saved me when I was 14, 13, whatever it was.
Yeah, talk about a purpose. I mean, that's going to put passion into your work, right? That's going to create a whole new perspective as the president of a company when you understand what these products do for people.
I do, and I know we're not here to talk about emergency preparedness, but when I assumed the role as president, we did some exit surveys of our customers, and we said, how many of you people use our food every day? Because, this food has 25 or 30-year shelf life, all of it, whether it's the pouch or the can or the big bags that are kits, whatever it is, 25 or 30-year shelf life. And 20%, 22% of our customers said that they used it regularly. Now, I don't know what regularly meant to that person, but let's just say that that's every month or every week. 22%. That means most of our food was going into a bunker. And that's a terrible way to run a manufacturing business.
Right.
If nobody ever uses your product, you're going to run out of customers super fast.
Right.
And so because of my personal story, my PR guy he got interested in it. And I believe I've been on TV or radio, I think it's 83 or 84 times now in the last couple of years. And so we started telling that story. We started broadcasting the idea that our food was actually tasted good. And we went through and we reformulated the ones that didn't, frankly, taste very good. And now that number is 56% use our product regularly.
That's a huge
shift. And the other thing that's super cool about it is 6% back 2.5 years ago, 6% of our customers stored our product in their pantry. Okay, that's 94% that are putting it in basements, bunkers, garages, sheds. I don't know where they were storing it. Yeah. We've got that number almost to 30% now. So every quarter, it just is moving up slowly as people buy our food and then they try it. And when you try it, you realize this isn't grandpa's MRE. This is good food. Key to manufacturing, having a product that serves its purpose super well, tastes good in the case of food. If it's a mechanical thing that it performs well, whatever it is, it just needs to be good for the purpose that intended.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you're probably one of the few manufacturers in the US that doesn't, I guess OEMs in the US that don't employ built-in obsolescence, right? So you have to figure out another way to sell more product, right?
So that's funny. We're the exact opposite. We build in perpetuity. It lasts a long time.
Yeah.
We actually purchased back from a customer that we found out had a 42-year-old cans of food. These number 10 cans right behind me here.
Wow.
42 years old. And, we weren't sure what we were going to get because, you can promise a shelf life, but can you prove it? And we've done all sorts of studies and can validate our shelf life. But we brought it back and they opened it and they, quickly took a sample and closed it back up to make sure. And we tested it and there was no microbial thing. And so then they opened it and they smelled it and finally we cooked it and people put it in their mouths and it was okay. It wasn't great. 40-year-old food. I was hoping for a little better, but that is 30% past its best by date.
Right. Yeah. It's still gonna save your life if you need it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The nutritional stuff was excellent. It was it just felt like it had aged a little bit, but that's 40-year-old food. And
that's crazy.
It's super cool. It was it's the precursor to our creamy chicken and rice casserole.
Okay.
So it had creamers, it had rice, it had chicken bouillon flavor. I don't know what all it had, chives, and a multitude of things. It's now actually a totally different thing. I don't even know what their original recipe really was. The records don't go back that far, but it was totally palatable. If you were in trouble, you'd be pretty happy to have something like that.
And who knows, maybe it tasted as good as it did back then.
Right. This business of, emergency meals and meals on the go, camping meals and stuff like that, that has totally changed. So now there are so many players in this space and the backpacking meals are fantastic. We have some that cook almost instantly, within a couple of minutes, you've got food that is ready, just hot water. In fact, one of them is right here, right above my head, right there. I think that's a breakfast of some kind, but it is totally transformed, and the ability to freeze dry product. So dehydrated product is one thing. Now we freeze dry it, so we can say, what's the best way? Well, we want oats to dry naturally in the sun, then we roll them and get them prepared. But in the case of fruits and vegetables, freeze drying actually preserves the flavor and the texture a little better.
Right. Yep.
Most of the time. So we're able to go out now over the last even 10 years, the quality of the food has just dramatically improved because the dehydration and the freeze drying technology is just outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm way into it. As you know, I'm a big hiker. I go out and do solo hikes every year. Actually, last year, I I decided I was going to do a hike without any food.
Oh,
And so my goal was to do 100 miles with no food. And I made it 70. And it was more difficult than I expected it to be, simply because foraging, which I'm pretty proficient at, is really hard to do on the go. Like it takes time to process, like acorns, for example. I mean, I was eating acorns, but you got to process them. You got to boil them over and over and over again. But anyway, I eat a lot of freeze dried meals. I think if we could invent one that heats up quickly, but also cools down quickly, because I know when you're at camp at the end of the day, you're like cooking this thing and then you have to wait 20 minutes to eat it. You're like, come on, cool off. I'm putting it like in the stream and trying to cool my cup off, but I know that's impossible.
well, it is. And you need that heat kept in that Mylar bag
Yeah.
to get it to reconstitute properly.
Yeah.
One of the frustrations I have, and we've been working on it with our meals, is everything reconstitutes in 15 minutes. You're ready to go, except for the bean or the piece of chicken, and it's still
Right.
not fully reconstituted. And
Yep.
if you don't wait the full 20 minutes, if you don't put enough water in
Crunchy.
it, it's crunchy, and it doesn't serve the same purpose.
Right.
But I've been on the side of a mountain, and I have poured boiling water in that pouch and sealed it up. And 25 minutes later, I've been really grateful for a warm meal because
You better believe
it's
it.
pretty nice.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. After you're just eating nothing but trail mix and jerky all day long, and you finally get to sit down exhausted, and yeah, it's a huge thing.
Yep.
So, in terms of emergency preparedness, I'm interested to just kind of hear your thoughts about, like, where are we, right, in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. I hear a lot of things about power grid instability and a lot of risks. What are your perspectives on what people need to be thinking about with being prepared?
So let's boil it down to first the basics. Everybody's in jeopardy because of illness, injury, and job loss. What I call the everyday emergency.
Yep.
You have the Nate Wheeler of the world and the Nathan Yearsley of the world. We have resources set aside. We've got food in our home. But there could, if we have a prolonged illness or prolonged job loss, we could start to run out. And sometimes there are agencies, charities, whatever, that would help us. But if something went really, really wrong, 90% of America isn't ready. I'll give you a crazy statistic. Even after COVID, after people being short of food, the average American home still has 4 days of food or less in their home.
Wow.
Okay, that's not much. The CDC recommends that you have 4 days worth of food. FEMA recommends 3, so 72 hours or 96 hours, whatever. That's what, if I were to grab a product, that's what this kit is. This is a 72-hour kit. You can buy them in the Walmarts. You can buy them, online, that kind of thing. We do that, and we put it in a pouch so that you can slide it under the front seat of your car, and no matter where you are, you've got it. You're ready.
Yep.
But 4 days of food in a person's home. Typically, we have less water than that. We have maybe a few bottles of water or whatever. So if water supply ends, power ends, those kind of things, people get hungry very, very fast. Outside of that, the United States and the world is extremely vulnerable. I spent some time worrying about power, mostly because I don't think it would be easy to get by without power. And the power grid is extremely vulnerable. The best book, I actually read it twice because I was just blown away. It's an old book. It's probably 15 years old now. Was called Lights Out by Ted Koppel. It talks about the vulnerability of the power grid in a way that you'll never look at a substation or a transformer hanging on a power pole. You'll never look at it the same way. And it caused me to go get some solar powered battery.
Yep.
I actually went to Four Patriots.
Yep.
And,
Yeah,
I
I got one of their solar generators.
great. So do we. And I'm really grateful for it. I got a big one and a little one because that was the bundle.
Yep.
Super grateful for that. And
Yep.
it would get us for a couple days. And
Yep.
if I live in Utah, I get sun a lot. I can probably recharge it. So I'm feeling pretty decent about that.
Yeah.
So I thought my way through that. If you look at water supply, and I look at places, Michigan's had, there's been water supply problems all over the United States. So that was actually the first thing. We were buying food, and I bought my first water filtration system, a ceramic pump kind of thing that's good for 20,000 gallons.
Yeah.
If you can find unfiltered water, you can kind of get it filtered back. Then I got one of those carbon filters where you just pour it in and it percolates down. If it's mostly filtered, you can run it through that.
Right.
So I thought my way through water. I worry less about shelter unless I have to flee my home. I already have shelter. So I have a tent. I could make that happen. But so I think about all these various things. What would cause you to have trouble? The power grid? Okay, I got it. The electromagnetic pulse concept, we're pretty vulnerable to that. It'd take down the power grid. It would permanently remove GPS and some of those kind of things. Our vehicles wouldn't run because we all have microchips in every vehicle.
Which
So
I hate.
which I hate, but I like all the creature comforts that it gives me. I had 3-4 inches of snow this morning. I liked turning on my vehicle, walking away from it, coming in. The seat warmers were already good. The steering wheel was warm. It took 15 minutes to shovel the walk so that people are safe. And when I got in my truck, I was comfortable. So I like all those things. And then I recognize it puts me at risk. So I think about the things that could happen. Living in Utah, I've got several major faults that could, if something were to happen along the San Andreas or any of the ring of fire that's, Oregon, California, that kind of thing, would very likely cause secondary earthquakes in Utah that could disrupt power, that could disrupt food supply. And when I say food supply, the reason is because the earthquake then puts the bridges and overpasses and stuff there compromised. And you cannot hardly drive anywhere without needing to cross a bridge. And so I tried to map from my home, map to my family. How could I drive to my family without needing to cross a bridge? And I rapidly came to the conclusion that I would walk because I cannot drive there. There is no route. There is no surface street solution that does not include an overpass at some point. Now, of course, you take your vehicle and run the risk, but if you could, but it's rough. So there's just so many. So there's so many things out here. I think about wildfire. I think about earthquakes. I grew up in Idaho, and I thought about volcanic eruption a lot more than I do here. When I lived in the South, I thought about tornadoes and hurricanes and ice storms. Ice storms bring down the power, and it can take a week to recover. It's everywhere. So my thought about this, Nate, is everybody try to get 30 days of food, set it aside. Get water filtration, get warm clothes, get a temporary shelter so that, okay, I can make it 30 days. And when you're done with 30 days, test some of the food. Okay, some of it you like, some of it you don't, and then supplement it and work toward 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable. During COVID, when everything kind of shut down, I was really grateful that the first shutdown, I had been to the grocery store about 4 or 5 days before, so there was still stuff on the shelves, and I had about 3 or 4 weeks worth of food. I didn't have to go back until most of that craziness was over. I felt really, really bad for the people who didn't have anything. So
Yeah,
we've already lived the test run.
right, exactly. And I think it was exactly that, a trial run.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it is crazy to me to think that people only have 4 days of food on their shelf or 3 days of food on their shelf. Because there's so many things that can happen. And there's been so many case studies like COVID, like, FEMA response and people not eating down in the Carolinas and all these things that have happened, and then you look at, I just heard a stat that there's 22% confidence rate in Congress. So the American people have 22% of them, I guess, have confidence in Congress. Well, okay, so if you don't trust your government, which I don't think anybody should, then how do you trust that they're going to save your butt when it really comes down to it, when you need a meal? I don't think they're going to be able to.
So I'm on the board of directors for the Disaster Recovery Coalition of America. And that is a trade group where all the big companies that respond to emergencies, we get together and talk through how we can better respond for emergencies. And I'm going to tell you, every one of them says, FEMA's wonderful. They're always present at our meetings and our board meetings and our conventions and stuff like that. They're great. FEMA's great.
Yep.
But they can only do what they can do. And I had the privilege.
If you have this hat that I have in my background here, they're not going to do anything for you.
Correct.
So actually, this was one of my previous podcast guests sent this to me, but it's make equipment great again. They're
yeah, I love that. So I had the privilege. I was on a radio broadcast in North Carolina right after the Hurricane Helene went through, and we were talking about how difficult it was. And actually, the radio host informed me about a lot of stuff that was going on that had not hit the media. So I went to my team and I said, "Do we have any food that's not spoken for?" And there were some returns. They were perfect, 100% good quality. They got delayed in a shipment. Now, they have a 30-year shelf life, but they got delayed in a shipment for a couple of weeks, and the customer's like, "Well, they're old." So we replaced them, and they came back, and they were completely sellable. Everything was fine. And I said, let's send that to, and we got busy, and we found a place to send it into North Carolina, because there are people that are hungry in North Carolina, and I want to make a difference now. It took over 90 days to get that food into a family. So one of the things that people don't realize, you have manufacturing people on here, supply chain people on here. So you've got 4 days of food in your home. I'm going to make Nate Wheeler an average guy. 4 days of food. Now, we've all been to the grocery store during COVID. I actually went into the grocery store to experience what the pandemonium, even though I didn't buy anything. The grocery stores were empty in one, but really they say they've got 2 days of food in the grocery store. So now I'm at 6, all right? There is, in the warehouses and the distribution centers, there's usually 2 in the distribution centers and maybe 2 on the road. So I got us to 10 days worth of food in the supply chain. Now, there's nothing at any factory. Every factory guy I know says, I've made it, I want to ship it. It's got to go. So we've got 10, even if there's some at the factories, we've got 14 days worth of food supply in this country. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you, FEMA in the States don't have a lot of food sitting in a warehouse. They call people like us. They call ConAgra. They call Kraft Heinz. They call whoever it is. And they say, what have you got? We need a big order. And they try to place that. Some states, Florida's amazing. They're prepared. Other states are not prepared. So that food doesn't exist. They've got to get it to ship in. If the roads are bad, if the power has been destroyed, they can't even place the order. Right. And before you can send food into the Helene situation, you're going to spend 1, maybe 2 weeks. In the case of Helene, 4 weeks, stabilizing roads, stabilizing bridges, making sure that the first responders that go in there are safe and protected, so you don't have more victims. So they spent weeks and weeks stabilizing the environment so that the first responders could go in. And then when they did, red hat people, were skipped. I know the whole political side of this. But what was incredible is that these people had to make do for 2 months. And
Right.
if you haven't got it, if you don't have line of sight on how you're going to eat for a couple months or 3 months, um, you may not have it, and you may get very, very hungry because your child or your parents or you get hungry every day, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that's how I think about it. It's pretty pragmatic, and
Yeah.
start
Absolutely.
with the basics.
Yep.
Just get a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny we're talking about this today. I'm actually 36 hours into a water fast
Oh,
currently. It's kind of part of my yearly. It's just a good way to kind of cleanse your body, and it's amazing. I don't know if you've ever done a water fast, but when you're done with it, it's phenomenal. You just feel amazing. You've never felt so good in your life. While you're doing it, not so much,
right.
but surprisingly, you can function pretty well. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
I'm on my best game today, but I'm not bad. But
Well, I admire you doing it, though. I have to say.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think as leaders in significant businesses that people rely on us, it is important to take some time to do things that are good for our own kind of mental and spiritual well-being. And I think these are all good things to do. Getting away in the woods, doing some hikes, doing some fasts, taking care of your body. It's all good stuff.
Yeah, and you bring something up. When times are tough, whether tough times are um, just because of illness or injury, job loss kind of thing, or there's some big event, fires in California, for instance. We If we go into that in a depleted state, our mind or our body, our emotional state is not. If we're not strong, it's going to be really, really hard to make our way through that. So
Right.
what you're talking about, which is protect yourself, focus on your health, keep yourself emotionally and mentally strong. It's critical just to be successful in today's world, but it is so incredibly important um, to make it through the difficulties. I remember I was a kid and we had run out of food and my mom was gone and my little sister, she's I don't know 6 years younger than me. Um, she's I don't know. Actually, that's not true. She's 10 years younger than me now that I do the math.
Okay.
And she's little and she's like 5 or 6. And she comes in and she says, Nate, what are we going to eat? And I was working at Pizza Hut. I'm making $3 an hour. I am big money. And I said, well, just make something, and I had eaten a little personal pan pizza that day. I was fine. And she's like, well, there's nothing to eat. And I said, oh, come on. Now I think my little sister is, being emotional. She's dumb, whatever, what big brothers always think about little sisters. And so I start looking in the pantry, in the kitchen. There's nothing. I opened every cabinet. There's nothing. And I said, well, let's go down to the food storage room. There's something down there. Because we had this place where we had shelves and any excess stuff would go in there. My mom, grew a garden. We were poor. We grew garden. We canned stuff. We packaged. We saved. We did everything. All there was a glass bottle, like a mason jar, of peaches, and the seal had never formed. So it
Ooh.
was on top. It was useless. I don't know why my mom hadn't thrown it out. I didn't know it was there. But that was the only thing that was left in the food storage room. We had zero food in the house.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the fear. So the good story is my mom came home with food from Augason Farms. It was charitable food that came to our house that day. I was getting ready to go find a way to poach a deer, find something. I was going to go do something. I didn't have any money. I had like $7, but I could go poach something. I could go fish. I was going to go do something. I was going to try. But the fear
Mhm.
that feeling has never left me.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I was actually in a pretty decent mental state. And when it happened, it was paralyzing for a few seconds before I realized I'm going to go take matters into my own hands. I was literally thinking my best bet wasn't to go ask for help from a neighbor, was to go
Right.
commit a felony. It's
Right.
crazy to do that way. But That's where my head was. And a few minutes later, my mom comes in. She's like, Nate, got a bunch of food in the trunk. Go get it. And I carried it all in, and I was so grateful for it. And emotionally, when we took that food and we had a warm meal about 45 minutes later, the comfort, the release, the peace that came into my life has never left me. And so when times are tough, you're on the side of a mountain, you're bad weather, whatever, and you can have a good warm meal. You know you've got water. You know you've got some power solutions that'll get you through. It brings a level of peace, just takes away the fear. And your children and your parents will never forget that warm meal when times were really tough.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. I don't know how many people in the U.S. experience a situation like that. It's less than I think we would expect. But that's incredible that you went through that. We were pretty poor too, 5 kids. You know, my dad was the sole breadwinner in the house, and we also had quite a bit of food pantry food in my growing up days. For our church, we had a food pantry that we would go to and bring it back for all the people in the city, and we ended up taking a nice chunk of that food home too, because we couldn't afford to buy it. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting, and it's so cool just to see where you're at today, where I'm at today, and we can criticize a lot of things about America, but we have the ability to do this, to get from where we were back in those days to where we are today. So I think that's huge.
I have to add something on there. I think about my personal journey, which you've shared a little bit about, or I've shared a little bit about. When I think about it from beginning to end, from super poor, high school dropout, college, University of Chicago, president of a company, as I think through that level of success, and I think about my siblings, chief legal person in a company, CEOs, I'm a president, CFOs, chief people officers, my siblings, super successful. I am convinced that there is more that is great about America than is broken about America. We just don't hear all those stories all the time. The media forgets to tell us that there's a lot of good in this world. And there's a lot of, I ask people all over the country. I probably took 50 flights, 75 flights, round trips somewhere last year. I was all over California, a lot of places, all over through the Southeast, talking about emergency preparedness. And my personality is such, there's not a lot of strangers. So if they want to talk, I'll talk. And, I'm in Lafayette, Louisiana, and this person is telling me the story of when they didn't have food. I'm in Denver. I'm in Charleston. I'm in all these various places. Physically, they're talking to Uber drivers and hostesses and waitresses, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that I talk to, everybody that's a kind of a normal person has experienced food scarcity. They have their story. Now, there's a lot of people who grew up, super middle class, and they don't have that story. Yeah. But I was talking to a guy, and he's in a business suit. He looks fantastic. I'm in boots and jeans, and I'm just a regular old guy. And we're both standing in line waiting to check into a hotel in Norfolk, I think is where it was. Anyway, it was over there on the East Coast. And he's like, what is it? 'Cause I had a big bag full of food samples that I was going to use on a display, food like this, that I was going to use for the TV display. And so we get to talking about that. And he's a Annapolis grad. So he went to the Naval Academy. He is super successful. And we got to talking. I said, one of the things that I miss, I said, we were so hungry and so poor so often that the USDA cheese that we would go pick up when it was available, like every month or so, I said, that was good cheese. I said, I really miss that cheese. And we got emotional because he had grown up, he's a man of color, has a lot more melanin in his skin than I do. And he grew up living on that same cheese. And it brought back to him this memory of safety, that they always knew they could get the cheese. If nothing else, they could have grilled cheese sandwiches kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was just such a real moment, because he looked he was probably standing there in a $5,000 suit, and we were checking into a nice hotel. I'm telling you, he had gone through it too. Because when I mentioned the cheese, which I still think is one of the great things I've ever experienced from a charitable food standpoint, that the cheese was so welcome, because we didn't get a lot of dairy. Anyway, it was just neat. So there's a lot of people who have not experienced it, but there's a lot of people, millions and millions, by my experience, who have. Maybe not as bad as I have. Maybe didn't go collect free food and deliver it into the city like you did, but they experienced it a little.
Right. Yeah. It is. It is. Once we get to this level, it is very difficult to imagine, like, why is that still happening? Seems like there's plenty of federal funds for this sort of thing, so it becomes difficult. But then I guess when we look at Minnesota, we know why. Not getting to the right places. So let's spend a little bit of time before we wrap up talking about the manufacturing. I know we really had so many other things that we were interested in talking about. Hopefully other people will be interested in listening. But so what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing with the manufacturing side? Are you being affected by the tariffs? Are you, how is, freight and shipping? How is all that stuff working out for you?
So it's all hard. Everybody you talk to, Nate, is telling you this is a tough climate right now. Everybody that's in the food business that I know is struggling economically. We've not been able to raise prices in conjunction with the tariffs. The tariffs went up, prices went up a little. Not been able to pass it through. Freight's gone up. We've done everything we can to minimize freight. We've done everything we can to minimize tariffs, pre-bought stuff. My business is such that the emergency food market is kind of a feast or famine. So we're in a down cycle right now. Everybody in this industry is struggling. And that makes it really, really hard. So a couple of years ago, realizing that the business had these wide business cycles plus annual seasonality. So you get cyclicality, seasonality. That's just a recipe for tough days. And so we had talked about selling out our latent, that excess manufacturing capacity. And I looked around. I'm a brand new minted president, still serving as CFO at the time. And I said, what am I good at? What are my strengths? And everybody should do a SWOT analysis by themselves on their own company at some point. And I'm like, we're really good at sourcing materials and putting dry food in bags and cans and stick packs and pouches, pails. We're good at that.
Right. And
we started to sell that capacity. So our brand is Augason Farms. The company is Blue Chip Group. And under the Blue Chip name, and we started selling that capacity and that blending and packaging capability to others. And I can't tell you who those people are, but these are big name companies who needed manufacturing expertise. And one of the great decisions that I've ever been a part of, because, I'd love to tell you it was my decision. No, their board of directors was involved. The leadership team that works for me, we were all involved saying, can we do this? Should we do this? We decided to do it. And selling out our excess capacity, and we're not sold out. We still are taking on customers all the time. But selling that excess capacity to stabilize the peaks and valleys of a cyclical emergency preparedness business has been extremely helpful.
I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, that's brilliant. That's it. And I just kind of, my mind goes to like, how could other manufacturers apply that philosophy? Because all manufacturers experience that cyclicality and, that uncertainty, maybe not quite as much as you, which I was kind of thinking when you were talking about the cyclicality of everything, you probably have a pretty good finger on the pulse of consumer sentiment or, people's confidence in the economy, right? Is that directly correlated to sales?
So it can be, yeah. I actually, I'm going to steal from my chairman, the chairman of our board here. He called it the fear index.
The fear index, right? Yep.
Yeah, there isn't one. I've looked for a fear index. There's like the doomsday clock and things like that. But I've never found
that was a real thing.
I can't find, if there is, I would love to find it. I've not been able to find one that changes. But the American psyche, as there is more fear, when during COVID, everybody was afraid and they were buying and stockpiling food. When COVID started to end, we saw easing of that. And we're like, oh, volume's coming down. We started to figure out what we were going to do to adjust. And then the Ukraine thing happened. Oh, World War III. So then the fear index went back up. Well, then it started to ease. Well, then the Gaza conflict began. It ramped back up, then it faded back off. We're going to have a Democratic president. Oh, we're going to have a Republican president. During the election cycle, there's a higher level of anxiety. Things like the Palisades fire in California, major hurricanes that do damage in the United States. Now, we had a huge hurricane this last year that took out the Dominican and Cuba and that region, but it didn't really clip the United States much. It did nothing. But if that hurricane, and I've forgotten the name, forgive me for not remembering, if that hurricane had landed into Florida, we'd have had a big uptick because people are like, I'm vulnerable. So the more people feel vulnerable, the more they prepare. And ironically, it's too late. You prepare. Exactly. You prepare. Yeah. So as I work as a CFO, one of the things that somebody taught me years and years ago, they're like, Nathan, when times are good and you're making great money, that's the time to cut costs. That's the time to tighten up, tighten the belt, get lean, get mean, because you can afford to do it. You need automation at the end of the line. That's the time you can buy it. When times are tough and your money's leaking out because you're having supplier difficulties or delays, your freight costs have gone crazy, whatever, when times get tough and you're not selling or the economics have shifted on you, that's the time you won't have the cash to make those investments. When times are good and you feel safe, that's the time to say, all right, how do I strengthen my company? How do I prepare myself at home?
That's a great point. I run into that a lot myself with marketing. I mean, that's the first thing people want to cut when times are tough, when they're, getting budget crunches. But it's like, it's going to take 6 months for us to really get this thing humming. And, you should have been thinking about this 6 months ago, not now.
Right. It took for me to launch contract manufacturing. We had one customer when I started. So they'd sold this customer years before. It probably took 9 months to get the second customer. It was so much work and so many pitches. We didn't even know how to sell the concept, because you asked the question a second ago, what would you tell other people? I would tell them, look at your business and what are you great at and who needs that service? And then the next thing I tell you is hold on to your hat, because just because they need it doesn't mean you know how to sell it. And we went to market and sold and brought customers in. And then I said something, literally, to a potential customer. They were a perfect fit, but the way I said it scared them. It wasn't that what I said was wrong. I told them the truth, but I said it in a way that made them think they're not important.
Exactly what it was, right? So you are offering, is this company now?
Yeah, this current company.
So you're offering extra capacity, and they thought to themselves, well, what happens when you get up to capacity, when you have a big influx of business?
They said, they went, and what I said is, we're here, we're selling our excess capacity. And they're like, oh, that's great, that's great. They went home and they said, well, I don't want to be second fiddle.
Right.
And, it took me a little while to realize that I'm always going to have excess capacity. First off, I'm always going to have excess capacity. And secondly, I then made a choice to change the company. I'm not an emergency preparedness company anymore. I am a contract manufacturer, and I support 30 plus brands, one of which is Augason Farms, the brand my company owns. But it competes for capacity on equal footing with every other customer. And some of my customers are such big names. You use their product, eat their product, whatever, every week. I'm going to guarantee it. You do. So does every other American. And I'm proud to have them in my factory. They probably beat out Augason Farms day in and day out, because I can't disappoint a global brand like that.
Right.
So I've actually kind of probably subordinated Augason Farms a little bit. And that's okay, because in the end, we're finding a new balance, a new symbiosis.
New market for your product.
Yep. And when I realized that what I wanted to be is different than who I am, meaning the company needs to be different so that we can have a different economic outlook. It's been rocky. It's been bumpy. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's been more fun than I could ever imagine, because selling to customers something that they need, they are hungry for it, finding the solution, partnering with them, and building relationships that I believe will last across, this guy leaves and somebody else comes on, all the tumult that comes with regular business. Those relationships are important. And that part has been a ton of fun.
I bet. Yeah. I'm a little jealous, right? Like, being in something that you're so closely connected to emotionally, and, being involved in that market. Like, if I could be working with emergency preparedness response topics, that's obviously, I love manufacturing. We do a ton of work with manufacturers, and I really believe they're the staple of our economy. But when I get off work, you know what I do? I go out in the woods. That's
sure. Sure. And like, I get off work and I'm in a wood shop if I can. Even more so, if I can, I'll be in nature somehow, even if it is just to drive up a canyon and walk an easy little path, or just drive through, because that's all I get. But I can, if I have to leave Salt Lake City and I have to go to Park City, okay, for some business reason, happens fairly often, I can take the interstate and the busy highway, or during the summertime, I can take the back roads. I take the back roads every time, because you get up to the top of Guardsman Pass or whatever, and it's spectacular. And I wish that every person in America could have a place that is natural and peaceful. Yep. And we don't. And I fight for it to get that in my life.
You have to.
Yeah, you do.
What a place to live, too. But yeah, what an awesome story, Nathan. I really enjoyed the conversation, and, just really impressed by you and all that you've accomplished and your passion for what you're doing. So really appreciate you coming on today.
It is absolutely my pleasure. What fun this has been.